Hello. Welcome. Nice to have you. I figure we'll probably 3 minutes late is not a bad time to start. We've got a great speaker here, so he's going to take up most of the time, but I do want to introduce myself and the board. So, hello. I am Michelle Abramo, the president of the Seminole Historical Society. On behalf of the board of the Historical Society, welcome to your museum. You know, the last time everybody was here in November, if you were able to make it, was Jim Schnurr, and he introduced his seminal book, and we had over 95 people in here, and we had people that actually didn't want to stay and walked away. So we're hoping with a couple more chairs that we've added that we're doing a little bit better. It's a little cooler, so it won't be too hot in here. But on a side note for Jim Schnurr, since that book signing, Mayor Leslie Waters and the City Council has had they've recognized Jim Schnurr, and they've proclaimed January 12th as Jim Schnurr Day. So that happened on the January 12th City Council meeting, and Jim was there with a big fan base, and Mayor Leslie Waters was able to give that proclamation to Jim and to all of us for having Jim in our community. So if you haven't bought a book, we have some back here in the gift shop. We've made an arrangement with the Friends of the Seminole Library. They have books also that they're selling for us. Of course, Heritage Village has it, Barnes & Noble. You can get them pretty much anywhere, but we will get some of the royalties of that book, so will Heritage Village, though I think we're getting more since it's our Seminole. So buy a book. If you do buy a book here or even at the library, Jim will be happy. He plans on being here at every meeting that we have. Of course, though, Tarpon Springs, he's doing a book tour now. So he's in Tarpon Springs this evening and tells everybody hello. But if you do buy a book and it hasn't been signed, please bring it back. He promises it'll be at many meetings for us, and he will sign it for you. I'd like to recognize our, I didn't know if I saw her or not, Tony Dio. Have we seen her, our city manager? Okay, well then, the next one up is Mayor Leslie Waters and her husband Al. Thank you for coming. And Councilor Bob Matthews. I know I saw him. And Councilor Jim Quinn. Any other councilors here that I might have missed? Okay. Let me also introduce our board. It's pretty important that you know who these people are so that when you see them in the community or they see you, that you go, oh my gosh, I have a donation for you. You're from the museum. So, Nancy Barlow, where are you? Nancy Barlow. She's one of our pioneer families. Gloria Douglas could not be here this evening, and it's a bummer. We do have a couple people that are homesick tonight. Gloria Douglas is one of them. Jimmy Vines is another. Sue and Jeff Etter. Sue is here. She's the best half of the Sue and Jeff Etter. They're our IT. They take care of our website, take care of all of our electronics here. So, and we thank them very much, even though we, with our donations, bought them the computer. They picked out the computer for us. So it's one of those things that we had to buy in order to have these great productions up here. So, so thanks to Sue. Sandy Holloway is not with us this evening, and wish she could be. Betsy McBride, back in here. Marilyn Money, one of our other founders, pioneers. And if I didn't say Jimmy Vines, he's homesick also, so I think this weather is really getting to all of us, or many of us. Just so you know, and a couple of people have said that, I don't know how to reach you. If you have been on our website, at the very bottom is an info @ That is an email address. It comes to Sue and to me immediately, and you'll usually get a response from me. And also on that website, right below that, it says my name and my home phone number. So if you need to get a hold of me, please do. I have an answering machine. I'm not home during the day most of the time because I do work at Powder Elementary, but I've got family in and out all the time, and they're always hearing that machine go off. So certainly, if you need to reach us, those are two ways to certainly get in touch with us. Oh, good. Oh my gosh. I start chatting and I don't even come back to this. On my list of board members, Celeste Horn, who's in the back, and Lou LeGrand. I'm so sorry. Okay, there are... Oh, Eve Jones. You know what? I was going off of our name tags and just going, okay, did I hit everybody? Eva Jones is also on our board. She's been bopping around the community looking for donations, and she is not well tonight too. So there is a huge board, and I apologize. Please don't tell him, okay? There are sign-up sheets that are being sent around. Those are for future refreshments. They are for fundraising. We certainly want to do some fundraising to keep us going at this museum. And there is also a sign-up for guides. And a guide is like a docent. We are working on putting together a program that our historian, Jimmy Vines, is going to relay to one of our very first guides, which will be Marion Chamberlain from the library. She's going to take down all of this information and put it together so that when she trains our guides, you'll have everything with you when you volunteer in the museum. And the museum is going to be open on Saturdays starting in February from 10 to 2. We're only asking for 2 people at a time to man the museum, and you'll have information with you so that somebody can talk about what's going on, or if you can't determine what kind of fossil that is, that, you know, if that information doesn't help there, then there'll be information on a little cheat sheet for you. So think about donating some time, even if it's, you know, 1 or 2 Saturdays a year, and if it's spread among all of us, that's great. And hopefully, which the board would love to see, and I know the city would love to see, is you know, us being open a couple days during the week also. We'd love to be open, you know, in the week during the weekdays, same time, approximately 10 to 2. We just don't have the manpower at this point, but really, just we would love to have your time. So sign up on one of those sign-up sheets, please. Well, since November, when most of you were here, with our board and help of many, many others, we've installed a couple new items in the museum. The first one is the World War II memorial that I talked about the last time. This was donated by the Seminole United Methodist Church on the anniversary of their 125th year anniversary. It was a wonderful celebration. There were many of us from the board, of course from the community and from the church. They had a nice ceremony, and Jean and Marilyn Money were there because that's their church and they were members, and they're the ones that presented it, talked about how it was made for all of the people that served in World War II in the Seminole community, has all their names on it, and presented it to the Historical Society to put in our museum. So that was a really nice day. It was a wonderful lunch. We had a great time, and we were able to get this back into the museum. It still needs to be a little bit cleaned up. There are a couple things. Gene, bless his heart, his Y is not there for Jean Money, so we want to try to get that taken care of. Also, something new, these magnificent cylinders. What do you think about this? Thanks to Dennis and Betsy McBride, who were on vacation this past summer, I think, and they saw something similar to this, where they were vacationing in I think a mall. Betsy, is that correct?
Yes.
Yes, and she took pictures of it, brought it back and said, I think we could do something with our community on these. And since we have these 20-foot high ceilings, this is what they came up with. So with them and Sue Etter, and of course one of the gentlemen from the city of Seminole who works in Public Works, there they are, and they are gorgeous. If you don't know, this is the water tower, the largest one. So we were hoping this would be something maybe to remind people that we still maybe like to have that water tower, and unfortunately if it does go away, this will be one of the things that we can remember it by. Of course, the oranges is the big deal. We have also the original Seminole schools. There is room for others. There's already been talk about possibly adding a couple more on there. But those are the 6 Seminole schools, Seminole High School, Seminole Middle School, Bowder Elementary, Seminole Elementary, Career Academies of Seminole, and Orange Groves. So it's a beginning. It's always a work in progress. So anyway, really nice display. We're very excited about it. And then, of course, the fossils are here. Those animals that lived here thousands of years ago are here from our backyard in Boca Ciega Park. They're here and they are on display. University of Florida, Dr. Richard Holbert was here the weekend after we had our November meeting, and I can't tell you how excited we were. Bay News 9 was here, ABC, ABC Action News, and Tiffany Rosano from the Beacon were here interviewing, of course, Dr. Holbert, taking pictures, checking out everything, watching as we were unwrapping. I mean, this stuff came in styrofoam and paper, and we're like being so gingerly taking care of it all, and Dr. Holbert is like telling us what needs to go what way, and he's telling us, well, this one's got arthritis and this one doesn't, and we're going, how do you know? So all those little note cards on there are all of his information that we've put out so that you can tell which piece of the fossil, there's 67 pieces there, of the Columbian mammoth, of the giant armadillo, bison, white-tailed deer, turtles, a lot of them that are extinct. There's the white-tailed deer is still around. The coolest thing about that particular couple fossils of the white-tailed deer, it's his antler. What Dr. Holbert said, what makes that one really cool is it's not a fossil. It's something that fell off the animal while they were still alive. So if it had been a fossil, there would have been a chunk of the brain skull with it. So that's pretty cool that it was still living. It's the only thing that was still living that was found that's still out there. So anyway, if you haven't had a chance, definitely walk by there and come back another time too so that you can really read about it, learn about it. And one of our future speakers is going to be, I was going to call her Pastor Judy, but it's not, it's Ranger Judy. She was, is she here? Judy, where are you? She is going to be one of our future speakers. She was here when, and kept an eye on the park, making sure that people were staying out of the area that they should be and in the area that they should be. And she worked with the Tampa Bay Fossil Club, who did a lot of the digging. And I understand, you know, we were just putting together some of the highlights that are on those cards, and one of those fossils is one that your daughter found prior to that dig. Is that correct?
My niece found
Or your niece? Okay.
with Eckerd College when they went back for a formal dig.
Did you hear that? When she was here and Eckerd College came back for a formal dig. So we actually have a family heirloom. So anyway, we've got a lot to talk about with that, but we're very, very excited that we have this. Let's see what else is going on here. Those are the biggest displays that we have just finished with, and actually World War II we're still working on. And then there are still many other stories to tell from families, businesses, and organizations that make our city so fascinating, and many more exhibits to start and to complete. But here's the deal, and yeah, here's my pitch. We need the community's help. We need your help. The city gave us this beautiful museum, and they literally gave it to us. I mean, they said, here you go. I mean, they made sure that we had an area for a gift shop, boardroom, of course restrooms, a library, places to be able to have a big garage that goes up and down so that we can bring in big pieces of equipment like the railroad cart that we have. But it's up to us, and it's only with the love of our many volunteers and our members that we have gotten this far. And I'll tell you, it doesn't seem like a lot, but it really is. We are so proud of it, and we've been working in here since April, and you know that every time that you've come in here. But we also have future ideas for fundraisers, but right now we need the financial support. We have commitments for insurance of the building, insurance on the fossils, and the upkeep of the space. Right now, the only thing sustaining us is our membership, which is annual dues and donations. We are all volunteers, so please, when we pass the basket or ask you at the door, please be generous. On the flip side, and there's always a good flip side, thank you, thank you, thank you to our members and the generous donations that are being placed on our giving tree, which is behind us. We really do appreciate the support that everybody has given us to the museum and our historical society, and we continue to grow in this community. And this is a great place for people to come when they're coming off the beach and looking for something to do. Be in Seminole, see our city park, and come into the museum and see what we have to offer. Something you can spend your money on right away too, just an FYI. We are selling raffle tickets. Tonight is the last night for the quilt that's been on display since November. We've been talking about this. They are $5 a ticket, or 5 tickets for $20. Celeste is out back there, and we'll be happy to take your information. And after our speaker tonight, we're going to announce the winner of that. Again, as I said, we also have Jim Schnurr's seminal book. And we also have, here's a little silly stuff, but you know what, these are the things that I love to get at museums. The $1 Seminole Historical Society pencil. And then we also have for $3, and this is only here in Seminole. If you've seen cars that have IRB, like Indian Rocks Beach, JAX, Jacksonville, TPA, Tampa, we're the only one that has SEM, Seminole, Florida. No joke. There wasn't anything online for that, so we bought a bunch of these stickers and put them on your back of your car. SEM, Seminole, Florida, okay? $3 and a pencil. So, now, on with the show. We are so pleased to have Dr. Gary Mormino here to kick off our opening of our museum. Dr. Mormino earned his doctorate at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. He is the co-founder of the Florida Studies program at the University of South Florida, St. Petersburg, and the Frank E. Duckwall Florida Professor of History Emeritus. That is the hardest word for me, emeritus. Although he spent his career in academia, Dr. Mormino says he always wanted to write for a broader audience. He has done so in a number of books. His best known, and I've seen it, a couple people already coming in with theirs, Land of Sunshine, State of Dreams, A Social History of Modern Florida. His writing is also familiar to readers in the Tampa Bay Times. Dr. Mormino is a frequent contributor to the Times and other Florida newspapers, as well as the New Yorker and the New York Times. They really want to get in touch with you. Dr. Mormino was recently honored, if you saw it this past, I think it was fall in the newspaper, was recently honored with the Florida Humanities Council's 2015 Florida Lifetime Achievement Award in writing, or for writing. What a fabulous honor, and what a special honor to have Dr. Gary Mormino speak to us this evening. Welcome.
Thanks for that gracious introduction. By the way, I remember Jim Schnurr walking into my office about 20 or 25 years ago wanting to do a directed study when he was an undergrad. I'm very proud of Jim. What a wonderful evening kicking off a new historical museum. And I have a Seminole story for you, although a story of a Seminole. My favorite Floridian, James Billy. How many of you recognize the name James Billy? James Billy was born on a chimp farm. How would you like that on your college application? C-H-I-M-P. A chimp farm in Dania, Florida. And upon returning from Vietnam, to his astonishment, he was elected chair of the Seminole tribe. And at a moment when the Seminoles were an impoverished group in Florida, lacking the confidence to lead the Seminoles into the modern era, he asked an elderly medicine man, "What must I do to win over my people?" And he said, "Son, you must first go out and capture, kill, and eat a Florida panther," which he proceeded to do and was promptly arrested for killing an endangered species. He pleaded it was a religious purification ceremony on sovereign soil, and in fact was acquitted. And as he was coming out of the Broward County Courthouse, the trial of the century, 200 journalists awaited him. And they all had the same question, which was, "What does the panther taste like?" He said, "It tasted like a cross between manatee and bald eagle." I'm going to be at the Improv Club this week in St. Petersburg. You've been a great audience. Well, when I was actually in Italy in the American Embassy in 1980, and I'm thinking, what am I doing here? It was a pretty good place to be, by the way. But 1980 was one of those extraordinary years in Florida. The Mariel, Haitian boat people, race riots, and when I returned, I said, I'm going to set out to write a book, a popular book about Florida since World War II. Because I realized only by being abroad the greatest story in my lifetime was happening every day in Florida. Every day, new orange groves bulldozed down, 1,000 people coming every day. How do you capture the fury of this crazy state? And that's what I set out to do. And I'm going to talk about that tonight. And the linchpin of the book is really the idea of a Florida dream. That there is something special about a state with palm trees, salt breezes, and most importantly, the promise of a better life, or at least a better January. And that really is the Florida dream. And I guarantee you no one is in Fargo, North Dakota tonight talking about the North Dakota dream or the Delaware dream. That really only two states qualify for kind of dream state status, California and Florida. Very similar, both long shorelines, etc. And so Florida's really had three great dream periods. The first was in the late 19th century. And at that time, Florida was so remote, so inaccessible, that it was restricted to the rich. And they would come to the Bel Air, in Bel Air area, the Tampa Bay Hotel, the Ponce de Leon in St. Augustine. And the idea was being formulated that Florida is an American Mediterranean. If you think about the orange. And they were trying to persuade rich people, you no longer have to winter in Malaga or Portofino or Nice. You can come to Miami, St. Augustine. And the next Florida dream was the 1920s. You can see this cover of Liberty magazine. This was a more democratized dream. Model Ts, Model As streaming into Florida on new highways. And that dream died during the Great Depression. And the third Florida dream really began right with and after World War II. By the way, the printer at the St. Pete Times said he was saving red ink. He thought something important was going to happen. And is that one of the greatest mastheads you have ever seen? And World War II changes America, but especially impacted Florida. That's going to be one of my next books, is Florida in World War II. Prior to World War, you have to put this in perspective. Historians talk about perspective. On the eve of Pearl Harbor, Florida was the least populated state in the American South. Arkansas and South Carolina had more inhabitants than Florida in 1940. And what happens during World War II, 2 million servicemen are stationed here. And they never forget. And they all vowed when they return, they would return to Florida one day. And for the most part they did, as retirees, as tourists, as transplants. How many of your fathers were World War II vets as well? How many stationed in Florida, by the way? Where? I'm curious.
Boca Raton.
Boca Raton.
That's
Yes, there was an air station there. Others?
Key West Naval Air.
Key West Naval Air Station. Well, you can see we still don't know who exactly came up with the idea, but they realized we didn't have time to build new military training facilities from scratch because of the urgency of war. And someone had the idea, why don't you turn Florida resort hotels into training bases? And they did. All but, I think, 2 hotels in St. Petersburg. Pennsylvania was one. Can't remember the other. Almost all the hotels in Miami Beach, and hotels such as the Everglades Rod and Gun Club. The Ponce de Leon became a Coast Guard facility there. And I went about 25 years ago. There was a reunion at the Essex in Miami Beach, this Art Deco hotel. And most of the servicemen, it was Army Air Corps, they were Italians and Jews from New York. And they all said, my God, we had never seen a woman in a bikini in January. And they just were utterly dazzled. Isn't this one of the more interesting photos? Look, back row, second from right. That looks much like Jeb Bush, doesn't it? That's George Herbert Walker Bush. Interestingly, the president looked much more like Jeb early in his life, or vice versa, I suppose. But just an amazing, the number of people, future politicians, famous personalities came through Florida. My father, by the way, a fourth grade dropout, was on the same island as George Herbert Walker Bush, who was headed to Yale before the war derailed him there. Happiest day in American history, Florida history, Seminole history, is VJ Day, 1945. The boys are coming home. Everyone has money in the pocket. Our cities and factories had not been bombed. Everyone needs a new car. Seemingly every GI wanted to get married, get a new car, maybe go to college on the GI Bill, and have a week vacation in Florida. Institutions like the University of Florida simply explode. Florida State College for Women is essentially transformed into Florida State because University of Florida cannot handle the sheer number of males after the war. Many alumna of Florida State College for Women have never forgiven Governor Miller Caldwell and the legislature for doing that. It is prosperity more than anything else that explains the Florida dream in Florida. If you think about it, that period from 1945 was essentially unbroken prosperity until about 2007, until the Great Recession. There was a road bump in 1990, 1980. Florida was still booming in spite of banking crises. It was the largest, longest sustained boom in American history. And maybe we can talk later, what exactly is the new Florida dream going to be? I tell my students, this is why we fought the war. For the 1947 Cadillac, that a young person would not believe there was ever that much chrome and metal. I asked my students, I said, okay, so when you're teaching your students in 2030, do you think you'll be telling them, you should have seen that 2012 Hyundai? God, that was an amazing car. Just not the same. There was a rush, a stampede everywhere toward the water. And by the way, maybe another time we could talk. That was not always so. The beach was, in the 19th century, not exactly a desirable place for a lot of people, particularly to live. You couldn't grow things on the beach. They called them barrier islands for a good reason. You couldn't get to the beach. And hurricanes destroyed beaches. But after World War II, this is in the Panhandle on Highway 30A, the Seaside, Rosemary Beach area. This is Seagrove. A historian's father bought this lot, I think for $200 in 1950. And the landowner threw in the house for free. It was a little shack. But that's what you wanted there. Pensacola Beach. This is an interesting one here. How many, don't yell out if you know the answer. How many of you think you know what crop those ladies are picking? Yeah, see, everyone says sugar cane. My grandfather cut sugar cane as an Italian immigrant in Napoleonville, Louisiana. Sugar cane doesn't look anything like that. It's more like bamboo. It's tall. That looks a little like Midwestern sorghum, but it's not sorghum. How many of you think you know the answer when we've eliminated? This used to be grown in Pinellas County in Clearwater. It was grown from Fort Myers to Clearwater, and the answer is gladiolas. You live a prize for that lady. How did you know?
Because I had heard about the gladiola farms in Monroe.
And you wonder, there should be a monument or a marker. And you also wonder, how can we get gladiolas from Colombia for $3 at Publix? But that's another. But the point I'm showing you this, we need to discover and appreciate where things used to come from. It's like many young people with a citrus grow. I mean, where do you get that glass of citrus juice? Well, there used to be citrus groves here, and we need a better historical appreciation. It'd be fun, actually, if you could find someone to do. There's a lot of literature on these gladiola places. They needed a lot of water, by the way. The selling of Florida. And Cape Coral is probably the greatest success story, depending upon your definition of success. The Rosen brothers from Baltimore came. They had made their money selling shampoo on early television. And I'm looking for a gentleman. You win, I think. Actually, that's not bad either, the guy with the white hair. They needed someone with a magnificent mane of hair. And the guy would come out holding a lamb on television with this terrible French accent. And he said, do you know why a lamb is never bald? And it was because of lanolin. And this was in the shampoo. And they used the money to buy a Redfish Point, which they turned into Cape Coral. And aggressive advertising. If they saw a tourist in Seminole or St. Petersburg, they would offer you a free plane ride and a steak dinner. And they'd fly over, and then they'd land, they'd put you in a kind of an isolation booth and say, surely you can afford $20 a month for the Florida Dream. And of course, what would be your excuse why you couldn't put $20 down? You had forgotten what? Your checkbook. They had blank checks in every bank in America. And that is that a 59 Chevy? 59 Chevy, is that a Impala? That's a pretty, that series of Chevys, that was an amazing period. Here's from the St. Petersburg Times. You could also mail in your deposit. And note the clipping, it says, water view. Now the advertising is wonderful. Water view, $20 down, $20 a month. Waterfront, $40 down, $40 a month. When they dredged so much of Cape Coral, everyone had a water view. And by the way, during the Great Recession, they got hammered. There were actually foreclosure boat tours of Cape Coral. I'll tell you about an unfortunate story I had with this, but this is what Cape Coral looked like in 1958. There were 4 cars. And how many, I always forget to do this, how many of you honestly would have guessed Cape Coral if I had asked you, what's the largest city south of Tampa, St. Petersburg on the Gulf Coast? Is it Fort Myers? Is it Sarasota? Is it Naples? Is it Bradenton? None of the above. It's not even close. It's Cape Coral. Not only that, Sarasota is not even the largest city in Sarasota County now. What is? Northport. So these instant communities. So I'll tell you the story. What happened is George Packard, this very big journalist, was in my office from New Yorker Magazine. This is like 2009. And he said, Gary, he said, I need a metaphor to describe what's happening in Florida. I said, well, in many ways, Florida has become a Ponzi state. Now, I said, not in the idea of most people's conception of Ponzi. And by the way, there were no shortage of Ponzi schemers in Florida. But if you think about it, Florida, everything seems fine in Florida as long as 1,000 people come every day. They're going to pay for the sod, the tax bills, the upholstery repair. I mean, it seems we're in kind of equilibrium. And I don't remember anyone ever asking, well, what's going to happen when 1,000 people stop coming every day? It was called the Great Recession. And the Chamber of Commerce thought that everyone is a Ponzi schemer, etc. But at any rate, they got really hit hard. A new architecture defined this Florida dream. If you think about it, if you lived in St. Petersburg or Pinellas in the 1920s, you either lived in a bungalow or a Mediterranean revival. And if you were poor, probably kind of a shotgun-style wooden house. Well, after World War II, they import the split-level modern home. And how many of you live in kind of such a home? We lived one in Temple Terrace when we arrived. And you didn't need an architect for this. If you were reading the Miami Herald in 1958, you simply clipped that out and gave it to your contractor. You said, I want a house with a, you don't need a garage, you have a carport there. Marco Island. By the way, I get in trouble a lot speaking to audiences. So I'm in Marco Island about 10 years ago. There was a huge crowd. And a woman, a very earnest woman, a nice lady, she said, we need you to help answer a question for us. She said, we know, she's right by the way, she's right about this. We know that Marco Islanders live longer than anyone else in Florida, the longevity there. She said, but some of us believe it's the water and others think it's the air. What do you think? I said, well, it's probably because you're rich. And by the way, congratulations, you've won the American dream. And they were absolutely insulted. I said, are you kidding me? In France, you'd be flattered. Only in America are you embarrassed because you're rich. But yeah, what happened there? It's an amazing story of what might have been. And again, this depends upon your values. I think it would have been better if Marco Island had remained a barrier. It was the largest barrier island on the Gulf Coast, pristine in 1959. The Collier family thought so much of it, they offered it to the state of Florida for $1 million, and the state turned them down to be turned into a state park. And instead, they turned to this remarkable brother team in Miami, the Mackle brothers. And they had just done Key Biscayne in Miami. They're really good. And they were going to turn this into kind of a paradise for the upper classes. And it succeeded. They dredged, it was, filled, and here's Marco in 1983. One of my favorite field trips for our students, we go down there to Everglades City. And then instead of getting back on the interstate, we go southwest to Goodland. Anyone been to Goodland? This primitive fishing village. You can't believe it's still there. And we stop atop the Goodland Bridge, even though it says no parking. There's no one there. And I asked the students, look to the east, and there's nothing. There's like 358 degrees of mangroves. It's primitive. And then you look to the southwest, and Marco Island is like an Oz. There must be 30 condos, high-rise condos there. It's pretty amazing. Lehigh Acres is also a fascinating place. Did any of you know Leonard Ratner? Leonard Ratner is considered one of the great villains in Pinellas history. Anyone know why? He, more than anyone else, dredged and filled Boca Ciega Bay in the 50s. And it finally, they finally made that illegal, but he more than anyone else, don't mention the name and play like, well, anyway. And by the way, Leonard Ratner's family had made a fortune. You can't make this up. They owned the Decon rat poison business, Leonard Ratner. So he, with his profits from St. Petersburg, he bought several thousand acres of high and dry cattle pasture from the Frizzell family, and christened it Lehigh. It's not a mudflat. But he had a new idea. Unlike Marco Island, they were selling to the wealthy. He decided, I'm going to go after a new group that had never been evident in American history. Young retirees. Now, who would have been a young retiree in 1960? You have to think about demographics and World War II vets who had spent 30 years, and they get out, they're 48 years old. They can still go and use their GI Bill for air conditioner repair, TV repair, buy a cheap house there. The community was poorly designed. It was just, and it's still reeling from the Great Recession. Does this place seem familiar? Ridgewood Groves? I believe it's right here, right? And what's interesting about this is you might be able to sue, by the way, look here. First of all, I miss these mountains. Maybe I took the wrong turn, but look up here. What's that say? 55 feet above sea level. But, this was, and by the way, this is 1959. Prices begin at $11,000, $10,900. This was considered one of the more successful, and this is a meeting before, and this was, Life magazine came in 1959 and focused, that's one house being assembled, kind of shaker style, you know, with hundreds of workmen there. Nothing has idealized, romanticized Florida's image as a dream state more than citrus. And how sad what has happened to citrus, and what a perfect place to be talking about the importance of citrus. I love old citrus labels. They romanticize Florida. So this is an Italian contadina from Naples with a Capri label there. You have even the names. Imagine being in Iowa in January, stumbling upon this citrus label. First of all, the name Winter Garden or Winter Park. And the next one, Frostproof. And here's actually getting back, Dunedin and Cocoa. And a lost icon, a vanishing icon in Florida is the packing house and the roadside fruit stand. I can remember in the 70s going up 301, 41, you'd see hundreds of these. It's so sad. Where you could get fresh juice. I think there's, well, I don't have to ask you, how many commercial grows left in Pinellas County? The answer would be 0. I mean, as late as 1950, Pinellas County had 15,000 acres. It was, I think, number 5 in the state. They're all gone. I mean, interesting idea for a museum, if you get a couple lots and start bringing one back, but the trees will probably die of breeding. And the industries, let's have a little, you have to be honest now, you have to answer honestly. How many of you drank a glass of orange juice at breakfast this morning? More than this morning. It looks like about 1/6 the audience. Think if this were 1955. I mean, every hand. You know, we don't drink the juice. One of the, it's very sugary, carbs, but it's a train wreck. I mean, it's absolutely a train wreck. This industry, how many times has the word inexhaustible been used in Florida? The mullet, the red snapper, inexhaustible. The wetlands, inexhaustible. You can dredge and fill as long as you want. And now citrus. And been working a lot with researching the history of oystering. They were, as late as the 40s and 50s, they were commercially harvesting oysters from Tampa Bay. So you think if I had a platter of freshly harvested Tampa Bay oysters, you'd be willing to give it a try?
No.
Well, probably not. But I mean, again, inexhaustible, not really. I mean, there are hard lessons to be learned. One of the first times a Floridian was pictured on the cover of Time magazine, Leroy Collins. Martin Dyckman said he was the greatest Floridian of his century. Hard to argue. Hard to argue. Note the woman in the bikini. You probably wouldn't have that today. You also have to love, by the way, I think this is a paper mill in Jacksonville. Not exactly an iconic symbol in Florida. Tourism. BD, before Disney, AD, after Disney. Did any of your fathers buy a roadside motel in Florida as a family investment? I hope it was on the beach if it was, and they still kept control of it. Newt Perry, I love Newt. Someone should do a movie or a documentary. Newt Perry is one of the great Floridians. All-American swimmer at the University of Florida. He doubled for Johnny Weissmuller in the Tarzan movies. He instructed frogmen in underwater demolition at Fort Pierce in World War II and founded Weeki Wachee with the mermaids. He combined 3 great American passions into Weeki Wachee. surging, spectacular nature, a freshwater spring. Our love affair with the automobile and sex, all into one. And New Perry is forgotten for the most part. Even atomic energy can be a tourist sales point. Someone apparently was in Brazil and they ran into a walking catfish and said, and they brought it to Daytona Beach, opened a museum with the spiel, this catfish was a perfectly happy Okeechobee catfish until an atomic explosion. And now it walks on land like humans. Seriously. I've told students for years, someone needs to write a book about black tourism in Florida. There was a black middle class who wanted all the amenities we did. If you go to New York Public Library, go to the Green Book. And the Green Book was like an AA guide to show you where in St. Petersburg could a middle class black family get a meal and his wife could use the restroom at a gas station. You know, those kind of things. And this was Paradise Springs, just a few miles from Silver Springs, opening in 1949. It closed a few years later. Roads with mystical names, magical associations, the Panhandle Trail, the Orange Blossom Highway, kitsch such as Gatorland. You gotta love Gatorland. Think about, how many of you went to Marineland in the 1950s? I mean, no one had ever seen a leaping trained dolphin prior to that. I mean, it would have been spectacular. Now, for a 12-year-old, how boring. But then a dolphin leaping through a hoop, barking for seals barking, all that was really a big thing. Okay, I love this tale. If you go to Lake County Courthouse in Tavares, west of Orlando, ask for the oldest marriage certificate in the county. The county was founded in January 1887, and Elias Disney and Flora Call, a rugged pioneer couple, as you could say, were the first couple to be married there. And their residence was a place called Kismet, a Turkish word meaning destiny. And as fate would have it, the freezes of the 1880s and 90s wiped them out. And it embittered Elias Disney, joined the Socialist Party, moved his family to Chicago, where he was alienated by the socialists in Chicago. And by the way, if you've read, has anyone read The Devil in the White City? He's a bit carpenter there, tearing down the World's Fair. But fearful that Chicago would corrupt his family, he moved his family to Marceline, Missouri. Anyone here been to Marceline, Missouri? I am betting every person in this room knows Marceline, Missouri. Why? It's Main Street Disney. Has anyone here never been to Disneyland or Disney World? And, are you kidding me? Now think about that. What do we as a group of Floridians have in common? How many of you have read, you have to be honest, how many of you have read The Yearling by Marjorie Kinnan Rawlins? Maybe 2/3 of you. Probably what we have in common as Floridians, we've all been to Disney World, and which is sad. I mean, it really is sad, but if you got grandkids, what are you going to do? But Disney changed everything. When it opened in 1971, there's a great story. Walt Disney was looking at the land and site that would become Cinderella's castle, modeled after a castle in France. And he was looking at a cypress slope, and he asked an engineer, "Why is the water black?" And the engineer explained, "It's pure water. It's tannic acid." And Disney, you won't understand. He said, "At Disney World, the water must be blue. Can you make it blue?" And he said, "If you've got enough money, we can do just about anything." And that's the happiest place on earth. But the impact, think of coming to Sunken Gardens in the 1930s or 40s. I mean, Midwesterners had never seen an orchid before, and a bougainvillea, hibiscus, in January. These were magical places. And one by one, they went out of business. The mom and pop tourist establishments. Very sad, but it's change. Again, inexhaustible, not really. Here's the only time I get even remotely close to politics, and it's really not even. So my favorite Disney movie. Has everyone seen? Has anyone not seen Fantasia in here? Surely. Okay. Disney had made a fortune off his first two films, Snow White and Cinderella, and he was very nervous about making Fantasia. This is not a feel-good, happy movie that you cry at the end. It has dark German literature. It has Russian classical music. And in my favorite scene, The Sorcerer's Apprentice, Mickey, an impertinent mouse, is apprenticed to Yin Sid, the wise sorcerer. And the sorcerer tells Mickey, before you can be a wizard, you have to haul water from the well to the castle. And being an impetuous mouse, he takes the wizard's wand and commands the broomstick to do the work, which works fine until the castle begins to flood. And he can't haul. And so he takes an axe, slices into 1,000 pieces, splinters. Each splinter becomes a broom disciple, and it looked like it was doomed. And the wise sorcerer Yin Sid arrives, Disney spelled backward, and halts the chaos. It's the perfect metaphor for Florida today. What a beautiful, perfect state we have. The problem with Florida today, as I see it, is how do you balance the two great goals everyone wants? How do you preserve the Florida that attracted you in the first place? The pristine lakes, the surging springs, the rivers brimming with bass, and provide jobs for 21 million good jobs for 21 million residents, and maintain this balance. It's hard to do. We're creating jobs. The jobs aren't very good now, and I don't know what the tipping point is going to be. I think there will be a tipping point sometime in the future. Now, I should add, if you had asked me 30 years ago, what will happen when Florida has 20 million residents and becomes the third largest state? We collapse. Well, we're not collapsing. Will 30 million people be too many? I don't know the answer. I'm not pretending to be an urban planner. But there will be a tipping point in the future when people, retirees, tourists will say, you know, I just don't want to move or go for a vacation in Florida anymore. It's too dirty, it's too crowded, the traffic is insane, and my nephew can't get a good job there. And to me, the Sorcerer's Apprentice is the perfect metaphor for Florida. And at least we should be having the discussion. What do we want to be when we grow up as a state? I don't think we're having that discussion. Television in Florida. Someone should do a book on early television in Florida. Florida was warm and fuzzy during those early years. It's live from Miami Beach. The June Taylor Dancers, the Jackie Gleason Show, Arthur Godfrey strumming his ukulele at Roney Plaza, Sea Hunt, General Ben, I Dream of Jeannie. Florida, there was a love affair on television with Florida. Sometime around 1980, Florida got weird. Eileen Wuornos, Pat Bundy, walking catfish, dread, Nile virus. The single most asked question I get is, why is Florida so weird? And I've never written about it, but if I did, I would approach it two ways. It seems to me there are two questions there. One, do perfectly normal people become weird when they move here, like many of you? Or does Florida attract weird people? Is that kind of like a magnet? But I get a lot of questions. I haven't asked you, by the way, how many of you are Florida natives? It looks about a meteor of Florida. It looks like about 1/3 of the audience, which is exactly the state average. 1 of 3 Floridians is a native. It's probably going to be going up for a few years because outsiders weren't moving here in droves in the last 10 years. You have a lot of babies, but it will probably go down in 10 years as well. By the way, who golfs in wingtip shoes and a three-piece suit? Nixon, by the way, had a home in Key Biscayne. It's been torn down. This is one that should appeal to us, since I'm also a senior citizen. I was always reluctant to talk about this topic when I wasn't a senior citizen. To me, one of the most astonishing transformations of Florida is that from most of Florida history, Florida was younger than the national average. But after World War II, there was this extraordinary surge in the number of senior citizens coming here. And it's fascinating. Several things had to take place. Without any of these, I don't think you'd have it. First and most obviously, we had to live longer. And if you were born in 1880, 55 was your longevity. Now, if women born today should live to 90. New medical revolution, statin drugs, blood plasma, penicillin, we live longer. But just because you live longer doesn't mean that you want to move to Seminole. You could live perfectly healthy lives in Duluth or Decatur, Illinois. Two things had to happen, I think. And one is changing definition of retirement. Retirement used to be tantamount to death. My wife's grandfather, a Decatur, Illinois farmer, he wanted to die on his tractor. He thought that would be kind of a Viking's death at age 70. Seriously. And at that time, in the 60s and 70s, generally when you retired, death wasn't far behind. But now if you move to Florida, if you're a female, move to Florida at age 60, you will probably live 1/3 of your life again, till 90. No society in history has ever experienced that kind of senior tenure. In fact, we don't even have a name yet. We call everyone from 62 to 92 a senior citizen. And clearly in the 80s, late 80s, things begin to break down. But we don't have a name. Is it super senior citizen? By the way, the fastest growing cohort in Florida is 85 and older. Bob Graham tells the story. You may know I have a Bob Graham talk. He tells the story that there was going to be a picnic for centenarians in Tallahassee when he was governor. And they canceled the picnic because the 100+ year citizens were all too busy. And that relates to the second point. There had to be a new definition of what senior life meant. And I have been almost every the famous retirement homes in Florida. Sun City Center. How many of you have been to Penny Farms? I bet Penny Farms is a retirement home for ministers and missionaries. Set up by J.P. Penny for his father. He felt guilty, don't we all? We should have been better fathers. But a fascinating place. There are Jewish, Catholic senior citizens. Italian Americans have senior citizens centers. Absolutely amazing. So one of the first talks I gave was at the Villages outside. It sprawls over 3 counties. It's amazing. And it was July 2005, and there's a huge crowd there, and everyone was wearing shorts and tennis shoes. And I'm thinking, my Sicilian grandmother, the idea of her in shorts and tennis shoes is inconceivable. And they all came by golf carts, and they stylized their golf carts. You can put a Rolls-Royce grill on your golf cart if you want. And I remember asking them, the average age was at least 80. How many of you feel old?
I think 2 people raised their hand. And there's obviously a very active senior life in many places in Florida. And that's what makes Florida so interesting. Let's face it, nonprofits in Pinellas County would die without senior docents, volunteers, no question about it. By the way, that's Sarasota, 1940, Life magazine, and he's reading a Life magazine of all things, the Soviet invasion of Finland on the beach. The most famous senior city was St. Petersburg, on the green benches, frugal Midwesterners eating in cafeterias, and there were 8 famous cafeterias in St. Pete. They're all gone. I mean, youth also flourished in Florida. How many of you grew up in Florida as a teenager? Wow, that's interesting. So in 1961 in Fort Lauderdale, a Time magazine asked a co-ed probably the dumbest question ever asked by a journalist. So why do you young girls come to Fort Lauderdale? And she said, well, this is where the boys are. And a Michigan State professor wrote a book, Where the Boys Are, Connie Francis song, and it premiered at the Gateway Theater in Fort Lauderdale. Out of curiosity, how many of you came to Florida as a college student in spring break? Where were you going to school? What happened here stayed here. Where were you going to school?
Oh, Wells College. It's a small school in New York.
Okay. Anyone else? Where?
Northern Illinois?
Did you go to Fort Lauderdale?
Yes.
In 61 or 62, Fort Lauderdale, some of you may remember this, is alarmed at youthful hijinks. Things that we would compliment teenagers for doing this now. So they're throwing live goldfish in swimming pools. They're cramming into a Thunderbird convertible. And so they asked the Reverend Billy Graham to come and give a sermon. And he thousands of young, he said, what do you young people want? And we want broads, we want booze. It didn't end well. This is not a good idea. Shuffleboard courts. I think one of my favorite senior palaces is Briny Breeze Estate in Palm Beach. Anyone been there? You're kidding. Oh, this was in the news. A dairy farmer in Palm Beach in the 1930s allowed some trailers to remain during the winter. And he sold them butter and eggs. And he realized, I can make more money renting this property out. So he began renting for the winter for a few dollars a month. And ultimately, the group bought the farm and it had kind of a cooperative. And there's now 1,000 trailer spots there. Next, on one side and the other side are 2 monster condos. So this is some of the most valuable undeveloped property in Florida. And in 2006, a developer offered them, everyone who had a trailer site, $1 million. And by the way, it barely passed. Several of the people, they said, listen, I'm in my 80s, my son's a surgeon, what do I need $1 million for? And I have to move, I'm happy here, take your money and shove it. And, but the recession wiped away, but there's now rumors again. But this place is worth going to. I think it's near Boynton Beach, or Delray Beach, rather. This is the villages. 1949, to me, is one of those magical years in Florida. 2 things happened in 1949. The Florida legislature outlawed open-range cattle raising. Up to that time, depending on county, the cattle had the right to roam anywhere. And what was happening, so many tourists were getting killed or their cars were demolished running to someone's cow, and the law said you were responsible, and it was always the best breeding bull, never and so the legislature ended the open range, in effect, ended the Florida frontier. The same year the space age began. Cape Canaveral fires its first rocket in 1949. So the frontier ends the same year the space age begins. Sarasota, the air-conditioned city. Weigh in this with air conditioning, which more than anything else changed Florida. Had we not been able to get the PowerPoint working, I would have asked you, so you don't need me to tell you what changed Florida after World War II. And the first response is always air conditioning, except for one time. I'm not making this up. I gave a talk to the legislators' wives in 2005 in Tallahassee. And I said, so what changed Florida? And I don't even remember her name, honestly. She said, the Tampa Mafia. I think I was too stupid to realize she was probably making fun of me. But everyone else, every single time, air conditioning. And it's, again, hard to imagine. I suspect this is a typical new building in Florida. You cannot open a window, even in April. And we're absolutely locked in with air conditioning. Which is ironic if you think about it. A lot of people, why do you move to Florida? I want to enjoy the outdoors. And you live. And there's this wonderful transition in Florida in the 50s. Everyone had a Florida room, screened-in Florida room that you enjoyed. And then TV came along. And you put your TV there. And then it became air conditioned. A man would come home afternoon, you'd read the St. Petersburg Independent, Clearwater Sun, and everything changed by the 60s with air conditioning. It's interesting though, by the way, everyone assumes, well, it was a revolution immediately. It was not. The first census we have on this is 1960, and they asked homeowners, do you have air conditioning in your home? Now, a lot of people may not have answered yes because they thought, I bet there's a secret tax if I answer yes. But assuming people were truthful, only 1 in 5 homes had air conditioning. That's not a revolution. The window unit is inaugurated in the early 50s. So by the end of the decade, and besides, by the way, many of you can probably remember this, so your parents had an air conditioner in their bedroom. Does that mean the house was air conditioned? Well, yes, officially yes. But by 1970, something like 80% of the homes. It is a revolution quickly at this time. So I'd be curious to hear from you. You can say, what an idiot. Yeah, you missed this. Feel free to disagree with me, or your own story, your own Florida story, or you can't believe I didn't cover this. So questions, comments, fire go. Yes?
Is there anything about why we need this Seminole?
Well, I've always heard that there was a Seminole village, but has there been any evidence, archaeological evidence, of a Seminole village here? Because you don't think of Pinellas Peninsula as a prime Seminole area. But that's why I've always heard. Anyone dispute this?
There was Seminole Village Motel and.
But which came first? Which came first? Yes.
Yeah, I think that might have been the Tokamak and that guy went extinct basically.
Yes.
And the Seminoles were really in the central part of the state and in the Everglades and that. So there really wasn't any Seminole tribe. There might have been some hunters around there, fish camps, but
Yeah.
it's not really known for
And
Seminole.
that's even, yes, exactly. So it's a beautiful, James Billy probably is going to tax you for this, by the way. James Billy, the story I introduced with, he's the one who brought casino gambling. He took, and by the way, it's interesting, the Seminoles in 1950 were the poorest group in Florida. The poorest group in America in 1950 were senior citizens. Seriously. Today, the Seminoles are the richest group in Florida. Senior citizens are also the wealthiest cohort in Florida. Variety of reasons for this, Mostly politicians are afraid of you. I mean, seriously. If you've heard the metaphor, the third rail, you touch Social Security and you die. Other questions, comments?
Great.
Thanks for coming out tonight. Appreciate it.
well, we're gonna cover that another time. I think he's gonna be back maybe 3 more times to go over some of those topics that he said I'll cover later. I just want to say there are refreshments as soon as we get done here by our committee, and this month it's Carol, Pat, Marilyn, Susan, and Celeste, so thank you very much. That's back here.